Plasma makes up 99.9% of the universe, and I'm pretty sure it makes up the other 0.1% as well. We just haven't figured out how. If you understand this about both our existence and how the universe functions, it opens up a whole new door to understanding yourself, what spiritual actually means, and what the ancients were trying to tell us, even though they didn't quite have the language to express it. Because you see, plasma is considered to be the fourth state of matter, in which it's highly electrified and it's a self-sustaining, coherent energy source in which its energy can be separated from the energy that it exists within. This brings all new meanings to the phrase as above, so below, and as within, so without. Because if we're talking about plasmas that are all images of the same general structure, usually called a torus, creating a plasma torus, we begin to understand exactly what they meant. And with this frame of reference, you're actually even able to look at the hieroglyphs in Egypt with a new understanding that perhaps, to some degree, they understood that if you got a lot of energy into an area, you could turn it into a more interactive and spiritually cohesive state. Some believe this is actually what the Dendera light bulbs are trying to show, the containment of plasma within glass tubes. But before we get further into how this is, I want to invite you to go to my website, adamweichel.com, and sign up for my free newsletter for how you can understand how you can best exist inside of a fractal conscious universe. And also be alerted to whenever I do anything new or any upcoming projects I have. Getting back to how plasma operates, plasma can embed within and without each other, just like we discussed. And if you look at human beings as a collection of nerves and cells, which themselves are self-contained balls of plasma, you begin to see that human beings themselves are a series of self-contained plasma beings creating one cohesive plasma being. Well, we see everything with our eyes as solid, and we think that just because we can touch something that it is physical. In actuality, we can only interact with things that are in phase with us. And things that are completely out of phase with us, we don't even have to interact with at all. So if you look at how science has been saying that the center of our planet is actually a molten core of spinning iron, what they really mean is it's a big ball of plasma. And plasmas can be self-reinforcing, self-sustaining, and they can exist in different areas, creating a bigger structure, just like a human being. So if you look at the different layers of the Earth, like the mantle, the crust, the oxygen or the atmosphere, etc., you realize that it's a concentric ring of plasmas stacking on top of each other to create a greater energetic field for the Earth to have an isolated environment in which it itself can have its own reality. Further, due to how plasmas embed and self-sustain these different layers, they use what's called a plasma double layer to insulate themselves to the surrounding area, and only letting in energy that is in phase with itself. So this means that if everything existing within our solar system is under the influence of the sun, these plasma double layers allow for our planet to encase itself and only let in some of the electrical signals. And what this means for those of us that live here on the Earth is that just like how music can be at different harmonics and how different frequencies can actually coexist without actually interfering with each other, we have the same kind of thing going here on Earth. And this actually opens up the door to understanding what different spiritual densities are. Because if this universe is a series of stacked plasmas that are operating within different frequencies of how fast that energy is spinning through the environment and then re-entering the core and then being squeezed out, what we end up getting is full-on realities that exist right next to each other. But that's a little bit more of a side tangent than I want to get into today. Because I also want to point out that if you start looking at the Earth like that, where the crust is not a solid bed of rocks and dirt, but more a more dense filament of electrified plasma that's moving at a slower rate than most of the plasma in the universe, our perception of reality begins to change. And you can look at things like the inner Earth and the inner Sun that's talked about in ancient teachings of the mystery schools and understand that what they're talking about is just a coherent ball of plasma or a coherent region in which people could live inside of it alongside of us. More to that, people have been talking about fairies, gnomes, ghosts, spirits, angels, archangels. All of these things could actually be taking on the form of what we call dark mode in terms of how plasmas present themselves to our eyes. Plasmas can be in the state commonly referred to as glow mode or dark mode. And they both operate exactly how they sound, as where dark mode is not visible to the naked eye and glow mode is very visible. These are the neon signs and different gas-based lights that we have. However, there's not much difference between a plasma in dark mode and a plasma in glow mode, other than the amount of energy that is flowing through it. Because it takes a lot of energy to get a plasma to the point where we can see it with our naked eyes. And this is due to how our eyes see an absurdly high range of electromagnetic frequencies in relationship to the world we live in. We actually, in a way, only see the shadow of our reality, because everything that's not absorbed is what we see. So when we look at ourselves, we don't see ourselves, we see what we aren't. And that opens up a whole slew of ideas that tie back into Plato's allegory of the cave, and even how everything that exists in our reality takes place within our heads. It also adds validity to how people say they can see auras or mentally interact with different beings, but only in their mind's eye. Because just because our physical eyes cannot see the electromagnetic reality that exists around us, our brain in itself is electromagnetic, and that electro web that inhabits the different cells and dendrites is actually itself a plasma. So when you think about things like telepathy and how you can sometimes feel like you know things you shouldn't know, this all ties back to how plasma can be embedded within other plasmas, and that due to how the double layer functions, you only are allowing frequencies that are in resonance with your plasma through that double layer. So this is why things like remote viewing can work, because they are aligning themselves mentally with their mental plasma with the region they want to view. And by aligning those frequencies, you start to get middle images that pop into your mind's eye that use the same visual cortex that our eyes do. However, it's not as richly detailed or, coherent, because there's a lot of distance and energetic plasmas between us. And the last thing I wanted to briefly touch on is how knowing that plasmas can embed within each other, this brings a whole new light to chakras, which are said to be spinning vortexes within the body. And these energetic vortexes all are segmented into what are usually different colors and different frequencies, represented by the different amount of petals, and also how fast they spin. These chakras could be viewed as separate plasmas stacked on top of each other that, by being segregated by the physical body, allows for us to have a individuated experience by utilizing these different chakras to create a fragmented experience of our unified world. So, for instance, our sacral chakra is separated from our mind, which means that we have to work through the process of understanding the world mentally before we can take physical action utilizing our vital force to bring it into physical manifestation or into a plasma. So this creates the illusion of separateness, but in actuality, we're all just embedded within each other. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you're interested, be sure to check out my website and sign up for that newsletter. Thanks.